In today's video, we're going to be trying to caffeinate cream cheese. Now, why we need to caffeinate cream cheese? Well, that's pretty simple. I personally don't really like the taste of coffee, so it'd be nice to be able to have something in the morning that gives me my caffeine without having to drink coffee. You may also be thinking, why not just drink an energy drink? Well, the reason for that is they're not supposed to be very good for you. So, if there's a way to extract the caffeine out of an energy drink or coffee and put it into something simple like cream cheese that you can put on bagels in the morning, then I think it might be worth a shot. So, to do this, we're going to have to start out with doing a simple extraction. We can't just go and pour a Red Bull in our cream cheese because that would kind of ruin our cream cheese. It would ruin the flavor and it just wouldn't taste right. So it's going to be a little bit more complicated. We're going to have to use an organic solvent called DCM to actually extract the caffeine from this Red Bull. This should be a pretty straightforward process, so I guess let's just begin. The first step was just to get a 600 milliliter beaker, as well as obtain my Red Bull, which I just got from Walmart. I slowly poured my Red Bull into the 600 milliliter beaker. The reason I did this was so that I could try to increase the pH because I knew that Red Bull was acidic like most energy drinks. So my plan was to use a little bit of sodium hydroxide to raise the pH to make the extraction go a little easier and get a better yield. I plopped in my stir rod and then started mixing it nice and slow. I used some little pH strips to test the pH before, and I determined that it was around 3 or 4, so I knew I was going to need to add some base. The base I decided to add was sodium hydroxide. I added a little bit in and then tested the pH again, and it was a lot closer to neutral, so I knew that I was ready to begin the extraction. Into my separatory funnel, I added half of my Red Bull. My separatory funnel was only 500 milliliters, and I had about 500 milliliters, so I decided to do the extraction in 2 different batches. Once that was complete, I added just a little bit of DCM. In order to get the best yield through extractions, it's typically best to do multiple small extractions versus just a couple large ones. So I only used between 20 to 25 milliliters per 250 milliliters of Red Bull for each extraction. I did this multiple times in order to get the best possible yield. After adding the DCM, I gave my funnel a couple of good swirls in order to get the DCM to be exposed to as much surface area of the Red Bull as possible in order to extract as much caffeine as possible. I ended up having to do around 9 total extractions for all my Red Bull. It was important that in between each swirl, I opened up the flask just a little bit in order to release the pressure because otherwise it could eventually get to the point where it does blow up. Next, I just had to wait for the layers to separate out, and then once that happened, I just had to collect the clear DCM layer. DCM stands for dichloromethane, and dichloromethane was used for this because it's a non-polar aprotic solvent. This means that it would be perfect for absorbing our caffeine out of our aqueous solution, which happens to be our Red Bull. Once I had collected all of my DCM with the fresh caffeine in it, I just needed to add some potassium carbonate. This was just to help dry it up, just in case I dropped any water into it. And I just threw in a stir bar and gave it a little swirl for a bit until I saw that it wasn't clumping up anymore, which meant that it didn't have any more water. Once I had fully collected and dried all of my DCM, it was finally time to put it in the special looking flask. The reason that I needed it in the special looking flask was because I was going to use a new toy that we got for the lab called a Rotavap. This is a rotovap. It looks really complicated, but it's actually pretty simple to use. There's the big green coil that pretty much has antifreeze flowing through it, and there's the big tan box, which is pretty much just a chiller. Apart from that, you just turn on a vacuum and the entire system gets pretty much vacuumed, and this allows liquids, as shown here, to start boiling and evaporating at much lower temperatures than usual. As you can see, there's a frost layer forming around the flask where the DCM is evaporating. This is because evaporation is an endothermic process. To help deal with this and to heat solutions up, the rotovap, it comes with this water bath which heats up very nicely, and as you can see, it helps boil off the liquids really fast so that I have a really concentrated solution of DCM with my caffeine in it, ready to pretty much obtain. I transfer the DCM into a small beaker just to make it easier to pour into what's called a sublimation chamber. I could just evaporate away all of the DCM from here, and then I'd be left with a crude caffeine with a lot of contaminants in it. But I didn't want that, so I poured it directly into a sublimation flask so that I would be able to actually crystallize my caffeine out to get a nice pure white crystal form. As you can see, I used a hot plate to evaporate off all of the liquid until eventually I was left with a whitish yellow solid. This solid was probably pretty pure caffeine, but I kept smelling the scent of Red Bull, which told me that the DCM, apart from just taking the caffeine, had probably also separated out some of the aromatics in the caffeine. My best guess is that it was probably vanillin, because I kept smelling vanilla throughout this entire process. As you can see here, in the sublimation chamber, nice white caffeine crystals started to grow as soon as I turned the heat on. Once I had gotten all of my crystals, it was time to finally extract them. I sped this part up because it took me a while to scrape off all of my caffeine crystals into the whey boat, but once I had all of them, I was pretty excited because it looked like I had a good amount. I decided to weigh my caffeine and discovered that I had obtained about 90 milligrams. According to the label on the back of the can, it said that 16-ounce Red Bull had about 151 milligrams of caffeine, and I had managed to obtain around 90, which means that I had about a 60% yield. Now that we have our caffeine fully separated from our Red Bull, we can start making our cream cheese. Since I'm technically not allowed to eat the caffeine because it was made in the lab, I unfortunately won't be able to taste what I made. But I did want to find some other way to save this. So I think what I'm going to do is make a little bagel and preserve it in resin or some sort of resin. Now that we have our cream cheese, I'm just going to try to mix it up a little bit before adding the caffeine. All that's left is I'm going to add some, but I'm not going to add all of it. I'm just going to add a little bit. I'm going to take a mini bagel and just spread it on. So on this little bagel, there's probably like 10 milligrams if I were to guess. Okay, so I came back at night to check on our bagel and resin with caffeinated cream cheese, and I don't know, I do have to say I'm not good at resin. I have officially declared, because this is a monstrosity, but it is a bagel with caffeinated cream cheese embedded in resin, I'm not sure what I did wrong. Maybe I shot it with the heat gun a little bit too much, but yeah. So anyway, that's how you caffeinate cream cheese. It worked. And yeah, thank you so much for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you liked the video and you want to support me in the future. I'd really appreciate it. And I can't wait to post my next video. But for now, I think that I'm done with making caffeinated cream cheese. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.